I just kept trying to carry everything myself. Like I knew I was messed up, and I thought you've got to fix yourself before you can know Jesus. Like I was so ashamed. I'm like, you've got to get this problem under control, and you've got to do this, and you've got to, like I had this checklist of things that I was never gonna do without Jesus. And I thought I could, I thought I had to. I was too ashamed and embarrassed and just so like, I can't go to him broken. And again, just not really understanding the Bible of Jesus hung out with broken people pretty much exclusively. So I grew up with parents. We went to church, and there's not a time where I didn't know God, if that makes sense. Like I've always believed that there was a God as a young child. Like God and Jesus and the Bible story was just so much a part of, it just was, you know, it was truth. And so in year 5, I decided that I wanted to commit my life to Jesus. That was the first time I sort of really understood the story, but I understood it on a head level, but not relationship level. Like looking back now, I didn't understand. I saw God and Jesus as very distant figures, like they were off in heaven and I was here on earth, and didn't actually try to bridge that at all. And as a teenager, I was a total wreck. So my teenage years, really downhill slope. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was suicidal. The thing that stopped me from killing myself was this real fear I had, because I knew that God existed, of if I kill myself, what if I go to hell? And I look back now and I think that was such an amazing grace thing, that was what stopped me. And so I pushed deeper into God, wanting the reassurance that if I killed myself, I'd go to heaven. Like I'd completely given up on life. No hope. Didn't see a future for myself. I'd have this voice in my head going, you know, like I knew the Bible, that you're a creation of God and you're loved and he knows the hairs on your heads, and I'd have this voice going back, that's true for everyone else but not for you. And so to suddenly have to look at like another 80 years on this earth, like I was such miserable, but like I had no joy. The best I felt was numb. And at worst I felt so much torment and so much panic. And I was just such a wreck. But the thing that really gets me is that I really felt that I knew God, and that God just didn't want anything to do with me. Like I had such this weird view of God as this distant, angry person of like, there's no point in getting into a relationship with him, because like, I hated myself so much. It was really hard to imagine that God didn't feel the same. But while I'm just spiraling hopelessly, I'm watching my sister literally transform. And she'd be sitting reading her Bible and she would just be covered in this something that I didn't have. And I remember sitting there and I could look at her and just know that she had something that I didn't have, and I wanted it so badly. And that made me feel like the worst sister, because I had this, if I'm taking, I didn't understand that we could both have it and we could both be happy and okay. I felt like I was jealous, and jealousy is a bad thing, but it's like, it's not that I didn't want her to have that, it's just that I wanted it too. And didn't really understand what was going on with her, just this magical transformation and really wanting it, and not, you know, like I'd talk to her and I'd talk to my mum and I'd talk to my grandmother, and it's God, it's Jesus, and it's like, but I've got that sorted. Like, what? And there's this verse in John, and it's, peace I give you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your heart be troubled, and do not be afraid. And I used to carry it around written in my phone. I had like a flip case and it was on one side, and it mocked me. Like, no joke, that verse gave me no peace. I'd look at it and it's like, do not let your heart be troubled, do not be afraid. It's like cross. Like I'm failing at both those things. My heart is very troubled, my heart is very afraid. And it just was such this thing. It reinforced my belief that I was the one person on earth God didn't want. And we started off just going to the morning service. They did morning and night services. We'd go to the morning and I would just cry. Like from the moment we walked into the church to the moment we left, I would just cry. And then Mum decided it would be a good idea to go to the night service because that's where the young adults hang out, and I legit was not leaving the house except to go to church on Sunday. So she's like, it'll be really good for you to meet people your own age. So we'd go to the morning service and I'd cry. We'd come home and I'd just calm down, and then we'd go back to the night service and I'd cry for months, and then God slowly was chipping away and just slowly drawing me in, where it was like I still didn't understand it all, but something was happening. The young adults pastor had organised a retreat, and on this particular night the family and child pastor, I think they called her, got up and was talking about it, and they'd been talking about it for weeks, and I had zero interest in going because I hate camping and I hate being away from home, and like going away with a group of strangers just sounded really awful. And then she jokingly said that she'd met her husband on one of these retreats, and that was such a God thing that she made this joke, because that was what got my attention. Not about the retreat and getting to know God better, but you might meet a nice guy, like, oh yeah, okay, that would be alright. So I went to the retreat and wasn't particularly enjoying myself. It was a lot of, I'm just awkward, and there was people I didn't know anyone, and it was just awkward. And I enjoyed the sermons and like what they were talking about, but again, still didn't quite get them. And then on the last night, the young adults pastor's dad was talking, and so clearly, he got up and he had his notes in one hand and he just drops them on the table and goes, I had this sermon prepared, but that's the Holy Spirit's calling me in a different direction, or something to that effect. And that just blew my mind as this perfectionist, organised person. Like, you put all this effort into something and now you're just not going to preach it like that. And I'm watching him and he just sort of stood there for a moment, and he had that thing that my sister had. It was just all over him, and that got my attention too. So I'm very like hooked, and he hasn't even opened his mouth really. And he starts talking, and it was the Holy Spirit. It was everything that was in my head about how God loved us. And like, I'd grown up in a Christian family and I thought I understood that, but that he was with me in every moment, with all the broken and all the ugly and all the things I'd done that I was so ashamed of. That he knew, and he still wanted me. And it completely blew my mind, because like, I didn't even want me. That like, God, who could have anyone, sent Jesus for me, and that Jesus in that moment knew of all the dumb things I do and knew the way I felt, and like, none of it surprised him. I'd somehow sort of convinced myself that God didn't know what was going on, and that like, if I sorted it out before I got to the gates, then it would be all, I don't know how I got so twisted in my thinking, but I did. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like reeling with like, you love me? Like, you really love me? Like, this is insane. And the most jarring thing was I'm having like this life-altering realization. And then it's like, he finishes talking and they're like, let's go to a bonfire and roast marshmallows. And I'm like my world's just been ripped apart and rearranged. And so I went off away from the group. And outside my cabin was this huge stone that said peace, which just mocked me like the verb, this thing that I just could not get. And I went, and there was a bench in front of it, and I sat down. I'm just sort of staring up at the stars. And I'm like, you love me? And then I'm like, if you love me, where's my peace? And I had what I now recognize as a vision. At the time, I didn't really know what it was. I knew it was God. And in this vision, I was standing beside somebody. It was Jesus again. Now I know, but at the time I was just perspective. I'm standing beside somebody, and they're looking into this room, and it was like it was just a stone wall and like a jail cell, like a really old medieval like dungeon. And the door had been completely ripped off. Like, it hadn't just been opened, it was like it had been like Hulk smash, ripped out. Like, they were free, and there was this girl, and she was on the ground in chains, and she was all hunched over in chains, but the chains, you could see cracks, and the person at the door is like, just lift up your hands and the chains will fall off. Just lift up your hands and the chains will fall off. Just look towards me and you'll see the doors open. Like, just lift up your hands and look towards me. And this person is just on the ground sobbing, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, like just really repentful and regretful, but just is stuck. So stuck in this moment. And it ended and I was sort of like that's not me. It's just one of those moments, like reading the Bible, I'd grow up and the person God's speaking to would say something really stupid in response and I'd be like, no, I'd never do that, that's so dumb. That was my really stupid moment where God's given me this vision and it's like, that's you, and I'm like, no, it's not. And he's like, you've got to lift your hands. I've forgiven you, but you haven't forgiven you. And because you haven't forgiven you think you deserve that punishment, and you're holding yourself in this cell when like freedom's waiting. You've just got to take it. If I was summing up my story, I've been thinking about this, but I got sent the question like 2 weeks ago. I've had 2 weeks of like writing down and deleting and writing down and deleting. The one I've decided on is gentle pursuit. Because I think I'd really convinced myself that God was far away, and he wasn't. He was in pursuit of me that whole time. Like he was always just a step behind me, waiting with his hands out, you know. Like there was nowhere I could have gone that he wasn't willing to follow to get me back. But I think the gentle part is really important, because when I say pursuit, sometimes I think of like really aggressive sort of stalker-like, which isn't Jesus at all. It was very much on my terms. Like I had to be the one to reach out for him, which I'd sort of convinced myself that, no. So that's important to understand, I think, that you've got to be the one to reach out to him, but he's always standing there, ready. Hi, my name's Abby, and this is my testimony.